the eternal light of Egypt, what if I told you that some of the most enduring dreams in human history were born not beneath stars of silver, but under a golden sun that rose each morning over the endless sands of Egypt, a sun that shone on temples of stone, palaces of light, and kings who believed themselves divine? Welcome, dear viewer, to another quiet journey through time. I hope you are well and ready to let the noise of the modern world drift away. Tonight, we travel to the banks of the Nile, a river older than memory, whose calm waters once carried pharaohs, priests, and dreamers into eternity. Before we begin, I want to take a gentle moment to thank all of you, our wonderful listeners, for supporting this channel, for your kind words, and for spending these peaceful nights with us. Your presence keeps these stories alive, and if you've just discovered Go to Sleep Historian for the first time, welcome. We're glad you're here. Please consider subscribing so you can join us again on future journeys through time made for calm, reflection, relaxation, and rest. Now close your eyes and imagine the hush before dawn. The air is cool, scented with wet reeds and distant incense. The desert still sleeps, but far in the east, the first rays of light stretch across the sky like golden threads. Here, in this cradle of warmth and sand, begins one of the oldest and most mysterious civilizations the world has ever known. This is the story of Egypt, of god-kings and sacred queens, of dreams carved in stone and songs whispered to the stars. It is a story of life and death, of human longing and divine ambition told gently, as history becomes a lullaby for the soul. Birth of a river kingdom long before the Great Pyramids pierced the sky, before the names of Tutankhamun or Ramses echoed through the centuries. There was simply the river, the Nile. To the ancient Egyptians, it was not just water, but life itself, the beating heart of creation. Each year it rose and fell with timeless rhythm, flooding the plains and leaving behind a blanket of dark, fertile soil. In that black earth grew wheat and barley, papyrus and lotus, and the first quiet villages that would one day become cities of gold. They called their land Kemet, the Black Land, after the rich soil that promised survival in a world of endless sand. From these early farmers and fishermen rose something extraordinary, a civilization shaped by the river-esque unpredictability and the desert-esque fierce isolation. Protected on all sides by barren dunes and distant seas, Egypt developed in peace, its people watching the same stars, the same sun, the same eternal flow of water for thousands of years. In that stillness, they found pattern, order, and meaning. They came to believe that all life was part of a divine harmony, a balance they called Ma. To live rightly was to live in balance. Between heaven and earth, chaos and peace, man and God. And so, when the first kings arose, they were not seen as mere rulers, but as keepers of this sacred order, living bridges between the human and the divine. Around 3100 BCE, tradition tells us that a leader named Narmer or Mini united the scattered lands of Upper and Lower Egypt into one shining kingdom. He bound the red crown of the north and the white crown of the south into a single emblem, a double crown of eternal authority. In that act of unification, the world changed forever. Egypt was born, and with it, the age of the pharaohs began. Imagine the early cities along the Nile, Memphis in the north, Thebes in the south, temples rising like islands of light amid fields of green, their walls painted with scenes of gods and stars. In these sacred spaces, priests charted the heavens, measuring the moon and the flood, laying the foundations for one of the world's first calendars. They carved symbols on stone, hieroglyphs, a language of pictures so beautiful it seemed almost alive, each sign breathing meaning into silence. Every part of this early world reflected a calm belief in eternity. The pyramids of the Old Kingdom, vast and serene, were not only tombs, but bridges between worlds. Their perfect geometry mirrored the perfection of heaven, their alignment with the stars a promise that the King of Soul would rise each night to join the gods in the sky. And at the heart of it all stood the Pharaoh, the living Horus, the falcon god of kingship. He was the sun in human form, whose every breath kept the world in balance. To displease him was to risk chaos. To honor him was to ensure the rising of the Nile, the turning of the stars, the beating of the heart of Egypt itself. Yet, for all their divine titles and golden crowns, these kings and queens were human too. They loved, feared, built, and dreamed much as we do. They gazed upon the same moon that still shines over our world, wondering what lay beyond death, beyond the desert, beyond the reach of time. The land they ruled was more than empire. It was a reflection of eternity, and from this faith in order and everlasting life grew art, science, and myth woven so tightly together that even now, thousands of years later, we can still feel their quiet magic. So tonight, as we drift along this ancient river of memory, we begin at the source, the birth of a kingdom where gods once walked, beside men, where death was but a doorway, and where every grain of sand held a whisper of forever. Let the night deepen, and the river guide you onward, toward palaces, temples, and golden halls, where history itself seems to sleep beneath the moon. A day in the life of a god-king. The sun is rising over Thebes, spilling gold across the polished limestone walls of a palace that gleams like a mirage. Outside, the palms whisper, and the wide Nile glows softly beneath the awakening sky. It is the hour when mortals still linger in dreams, but the Pharaoh, the living god, stirs. In this sacred land, dawn is not simply the beginning of a day. It is rebirthed itself. Each sunrise mirrors the journey of the sun god Ra, who sails across the heavens and battles through the underworld every night, returning renewed. So too must a pharaoh rise, purified, renewed, and divine. Servants move silently through shadowed corridors, their bare feet whispering over polished floors. They carry bronze basins filled with sacred water drawn from the Nile before first light. In the royal chambers, lamps flicker as the priests of the household begin their morning hymns. Soft, melodic phrases in the ancient tongue that speak of balance, of order, of mat. The pharaoh steps into a shallow pool of cool water, lotus flowers drifting on its surface. This ritual cleansing is not vanity, it is rebirth. With gentle hands, attendants pour fragrant oils over his skin, anointing him with myrrh and cinnamon. A priest traces protective symbols across his brow, murmuring prayers that invoke Horus, the falcon god who watches from the sky. When the purification is complete, the servants dress him in the finest white linen, smooth as moonlight, and fasten a broad collar of gold and lapis around his neck. Rings and bracelets of turquoise glint in the morning light, catching the faint shimmer of incense drifting through the air. At last, the royal crown is placed upon his head, a double emblem of Upper and Lower Egypt, red and white intertwined, symbolizing unity and divine authority. Thus adorned, the pharaoh steps into the day, not merely a man, but a bridge between heaven and earth. He walks through sunlit courtyards where fountains murmur and ibis birds wade among the reeds. The scent of blue lotus floats through the air. As it passes, courtiers and guards bow deeply, their eyes lowered, for to look directly upon the living god is a rare and sacred privilege. The morning's first task awaits in the temple, the daily offering to the gods. Here, within walls, painted with stars and myth, the pharaoh approaches the inner sanctuary, carrying small trays of bread, honey, fruit, and fragrant resin. No one else may step beyond the threshold. In the silent half-darkness, he lights the sacred flame and raises his hands in prayer. The Egyptians believed that without this offering, the gods themselves might grow weary, and that the sun, which rose so faithfully each day, might one morning fail to return. So the pharaoh performs the rite with slow precision, his voice low and steady. He speaks words that are thousands of years old, words that bind heaven to earth. When the ceremony ends, he turns toward the east, bowing his head to greet the full brilliance of the morning sun. Outside, the city has awakened. From the harbor, the sound of oars dipping into water drifts upward. Merchants call out greetings, children laugh, and temple bells echo faintly across the valley. The pharaoh ascends the steps of his audience hall, a vast chamber filled with carved pillars and cool shadows. Here matters of state await him. Petitions from farmers, reports from distant garrisons, and tributes from lands beyond the deserts. At his side stands the vizier, the voice of law and order. Scribes kneel upon the floor, their reeds poised over scrolls of papyrus, ready to record every royal decree. The pharaoh listens in silence, his expression unreadable, his barrier serene. To his people, he is not merely human. His judgment is the reflection of divine wisdom itself. A dispute over land is brought before him. A farmer claims that the flood has shifted a boundary marker. The pharaoh hears both sides, then speaks with quiet finality. Let the measure of the Nile decide, for it is the will of the gods that shapes its course. The case is settled. The scribes record his words. Justice, like the river, flows again. By midday, the palace grows warm beneath the sun. In shaded colonnades, the royal kitchens prepare platters of figs, roasted duck, bread, and honeyed wine. Musicians play the soft notes of harps, while palm fronds sway in the breeze. The pharaoh dines in the company of his family, his great royal wife and children. Though even here, etiquette remains sacred. Every gesture, every bite, carries ritual meaning. To live as a god is to live within ceremony. Later, when the heat grows heavy, the pharaoh withdraws to his gardens, a sanctuary of still water and flowering trees. He watches herons take flight and gazes upon the gentle shimmer of the river that has sustained his people for millennia. Sometimes he plays the ancient board game Sanat with a trusted courtier, a game believed to mirror the soul's passage through the afterlife. Even leisure holds sacred symbolism. As the sun descends, the palace awakens again with music and fragrance. This is the hour of celebration, the evening banquet. Dancers move like flowing silk, their movements slow and graceful, accompanied by flutes and drums that echo softly through the hall. Servants pour golden wine, and the scent of frankincense fills the air. But amid the laughter and song, the pharaoh remains poised, thoughtful. For in Egypt, joy too is a sacred act, an offering to the gods of life and light. When at last the day fades into twilight, the pharaoh retires once more to his private chamber. Priests extinguish the torches one by one, leaving only a single oil lamp burning beside his bed, a symbol of the sun's eternal flame. As he lies down upon linen sheets, scented with lotus oil, the palace grows still. Outside, the desert cools, and the night fills with stars. Sleep, for the pharaoh, is not mere rest. It is communion. It is said that in dreams, his spirit, his Ba, takes flight to join the sun god Ra on his nightly voyage through the underworld. There, he meets the spirits of kings who came before him, learning wisdom beyond the mortal world. And when morning returns, he awakens renewed, ready once more to hold the balance of the cosmos in his hands. Thus passes a single day in the life of a god-king, a rhythm of ritual and reverence, of burden and beauty. From dawn's first prayer to midnight's silent stars, the pharaoh lives not for himself but for the eternal harmony of Egypt, the land where even sleep was sacred, and time itself seemed carved in gold. The palace's shadow's night has faded, and the sun once more spills its golden light over the courtyards of the palace. The pharaoh's home, vast as a small city, hums softly with life. From the outside, it gleams like perfection. Walls painted in sacred colors, gardens filled with perfume, fountains shaped like lotus blossoms, and servants who move in silent obedience. But within these marble corridors lies a quieter world, one of longing, pride, and secrets. The royal palace of ancient Egypt was not only a home but a mirror of the kingdom itself. Every room echoed with ceremony, every glance carried meaning, and at the center of it all sat the pharaoh, the sun around which all others revolved. Yet even the sun casts shadows. The great royal wife, the queen, was both companion and priestess, the embodiment of divine femininity. She shared her husband's throne, stood beside him in temple rituals, and appeared with him in the sacred carvings that lined the temple walls. Her beauty and grace were seen as reflections of the goddess Isis herself. But within the harem, a sprawling complex hidden deep within the palace, other wives and concubines lived as well, each hoping to bear a child who might one day wear the double crown. Life within those walls was an intricate dance of devotion and rivalry, each woman dressed in linen and gold, each trained in song, poetry, and charm, all seeking the pharaoh's favor. A single word from him could elevate one to glory or consign another to silence. And behind their painted smiles, Jealousies bloomed like unseen thorns. History whispers the names of some of these women. Nefertiti, whose beauty was said to make even the sun pause. Hatshepsut, who dared to take the throne herself and rule as king. And Nefertari, the beloved queen of Ramses the Great, for whom a temple was carved into living rock, her image standing equal to his. They were not mere ornaments of the court. They were its lifeblood, its ambition, its heart. But for every queen who ruled in light, others lived in quiet fear. To fall from the pharaoh's grace was to fade into darkness. Some found themselves sent away to distant estates, their names erased from temple inscriptions as though they had never existed. For in Egypt, to be forgotten was a second death, a far greater punishment than any exile. The air of the palace was thick with both perfume and politics. Courtiers carried messages between chambers like whispers on the wind. Priests, scribes, generals, and advisors formed factions, each loyal to a different wife or child, each hoping to guide the succession in their favor. Even a smile could hide a plot. Even a prayer might carry ambition in its breath. To outsiders, the royal family appeared divine, serene figures in gold, their gestures slow and graceful, their voices measured and calm. But within the walls, humanity reigned. Love, jealousy, fear, and pride. Children played in shaded gardens, chasing pet gazelles while royal tutors taught them the sacred symbols of power. Yet even among siblings, trust was fragile. For every prince dreamed of the throne, and every mother dreamed of seeing her son crowned beneath the blazing sun. Ancient records speak of intrigue and betrayal that would not be out of place in the most dramatic tales of any age. One story tells of Queen Tai, the strong-willed wife of Amenhotep III, whose influence over her husband was so great that she was treated as his equal in state affairs. But her son, Akhenaten, defied the powerful priests of Amen and changed Egypt's religion, building a city to honor one god alone, the radiant Aton, the sun disk. When his reign ended in chaos, his name was struck from monuments, his statues broken, and his city abandoned to sand. In the silent ruins, archaeologists later found carvings of Akhenaten and his wife, Nefertiti, their faces pressed together tenderly. Proof that even among divine rulers, love could bloom, fragile and real. Before vanishing like desert wind, and there was Cleopatra, the last and most famous of Egypt's queens, who lived centuries later, when the pharaohs had become legends, and Egypt itself was under the shadow of Rome. She ruled not only with beauty, but with brilliance. Her story, though tragic, echoed the same eternal truth, that even in palaces of gold, the human heart cannot be commanded. Behind every ritual and crown, the pharaoh's household was a place of endless watching, eyes behind curtains, ears at doors, hearts filled with hope or fear. In the quiet hours of the night, a queen might gaze across the Nile and wonder if the gods truly saw her, or if her name, too, would one day be lost to the sands. Yet for all its rivalries, the palace was also a world of artistry and grace. Poets wrote verses comparing the queen's beauty to the full moon over the Nile. Musicians played gentle melodies to lull the royal children to sleep. Perfumes of lotus and cedar drifted through the halls, mingling with the soft laughter of servants and the rustle of linen robes. Even in its secrecy, the palace breathed life, a place where the divine and the mortal met in every heartbeat. To be born within its walls was to be touched by destiny, for better or worse. Every joy was amplified by grandeur, every sorrow cloaked in ceremony. And above it all, the pharaoh remained calm, watchful, and burdened by both love and power. He ruled not only a kingdom, but a household of fragile stars, each one orbiting him with devotion and desire. Perhaps, in quiet moments, even he felt the weight of it, the loneliness of divinity, the ache of being both adored and feared. Outside, the day wanes. From the balcony, the pharaoh watches the sun sink behind the western hills, the land of the dead. Golden light spills across the river, reflecting the shimmer of the palace domes. Somewhere, a harp plays, soft and slow. The queen joins him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. For a moment the gods are silent, and only two human hearts remain, bound not by crowns or titles, but by the same fragile longing that binds all who have ever lived. As the stars awaken, the palace grows still once more. Torches flicker, casting long shadows across painted walls. Here in this sanctuary of power and silence, lo and fear, the story of Egypt's rulers unfolds. A reminder that even in the halls of eternity, it is the human heart that writes the truest history. The order of the gods in ancient Egypt, the divine, was everywhere. It shimmered in the sunlight that touched the river, whispered in the rustle of reeds, and glowed in the flicker of every temple flame. To live was to serve the gods, and to rule, as the pharaoh did, was to be one of them. The Egyptians believed that the universe itself was a fragile balance between order and chaos. They called that balance mat. Truth, harmony, justice, and cosmic order, the heartbeat of existence. Each sunrise was a victory of Mat over darkness. Each day, the gods renewed the world through light, and at the center of it all stood the pharaoh, the human vessel of divine will, chosen to keep the balance from breaking. In temples across the land, priests rose before dawn to perform sacred rituals. They washed, shaved their heads in purity, and dressed in spotless white linen. Then, in silence, they entered the holy sanctuaries, carrying incense, water, and flowers. Their task was simple, yet eternal, to awaken the gods each morning, as one would awaken a beloved ruler. They opened the temple doors to greet the light, whispered hymns older than memory, and washed the statue of the god with Nile water. They anointed it with precious oils and dressed it in fresh garments, offering food, wine, and fragrant lotus blossoms. When the ritual was done, they closed the sanctuary again, sealing it in darkness until the next dawn, the daily rhythm of eternity. The pharaoh himself, though burdened with state affairs, was still the chief priest of every temple. He alone could speak the words of power, the sacred phrases that bound heaven to earth. When he entered a shrine, the people believed that the god within looked through his eyes and breathed through his lungs. To serve the gods was to serve the pharaoh. To disobey him was to invite chaos into the world. Imagine the temple of Karnak at Thebes, vast as a forest of stone. Columns rise like giant papyrus stalks, their tops painted blue and green to resemble a living marsh. Between them, shafts of sunlight fall like golden rain. In that shimmering light, the sacred procession begins. Drums beat slowly, echoing like a heartbeat. Trumpets of bronze sound their clear call. Priests carry statues of the gods upon gilded barges, their faces serene, their eyes inlaid with lapis and obsidian. The people kneel as the divine passes by, a wave of reverence moving like wind through wheat. And above it all, from a high balcony, the pharaoh watches. His face is still, his hands raised to the heavens. To his people, this is more than ceremony. It is creation itself, repeated and renewed. The gods of Egypt were countless, a family of powers that reflected every part of life and nature. There was Ra, the sun god, whose fiery bark crossed the sky each day and descended into darkness each night. Osiris, lord of the dead, green-skinned and eternal, who ruled the underworld with gentle justice. Isis, his loving queen, whose magic could heal any wound and whose tears caused the Nile to flood. And Horus, the falcon, the protector of kings. Even cats, ibises, and crocodiles carried divine meaning, living vessels of spirit. Every creature, every element, every star was part of the same sacred pattern. To the Egyptians, the afterlife was not an end, but a continuation of this order. They believed the soul was made of many parts: the Ka, the life force; the Ba, the wandering spirit; and the Oce, the radiant essence that could dwell among the stars. When a person died, the Ka stayed near the body, while the Ba flew freely, returning each night, like a bird to its resting place. Through careful ritual, the two would be reunited, allowing the soul to live forever. This belief gave meaning to every act of daily life: to work the fields, to build a temple, to sing I Am all were forms of devotion. Even the smallest gesture, if done with harmony, echoed the divine. The pharaoh bore this philosophy more deeply than anyone. His life was not his own. It was the thread holding the universe together. When he offered prayers, they were not for himself, but for all existence. In times of famine, drought, or plague, he fasted and prayed in the temples, believing that his spiritual strength could restore the balance of mat. But even gods could falter. If the Nile failed to flood, or enemies threatened from afar, whispers might rise among the people that the pharaoh had lost the favor of the gods. In those moments, the divine mass felt heavy indeed. Some rulers sought comfort in visions and dreams. Priests who specialized in dream interpretation, the prophets of sleep, would listen as kings, describe the shapes and voices they saw in the night. A snake might mean danger, a lotus, renewal, a star, divine blessing. The god spoke softly, it was said, to those who could listen between worlds. In the cool stillness of the temple at night, the pharaoh would sometimes sleep upon a sacred bed of stone, waiting for a message from the unseen. The priests called this practice dream incubation. There, between waking and sleep, the king sought communion guidance from the realm of eternity. For Egypt was a land where sleep and prayer intertwined. Dreams were not illusions, they were messages from beyond the veil. To dream was to be touched by the divine. Perhaps this is why the Egyptian world feels so timeless, why even its ruins seem awake. The temples, the pyramids, the silent statues, they're all part of a vast conversation between humanity and heaven. Every stone, every shadow was placed with purpose, built to preserve Mawat, to hold back the chaos that always waited beyond the desert. And though the gods have long since fallen silent, their order still whispers through the ages, in the measured rhythm of the river, in the turning of the stars, and in the quiet balance that lies between waking and sleep. So, as we continue our journey through the golden halls of time, let us remember, for the ancient Egyptians, divinity was not distant. It was everywhere, in the warmth of the sun, the coolness of the night, and the breath of every living thing. And perhaps, as you close your eyes tonight, you too might hear the faint murmur of that same eternal order, the heartbeat of the gods, steady and calm, still guiding the world toward dawn. Tombs of eternity in Egypt. Death was never an ending. It was a doorway, a passage into a world more vivid and lasting than this one. To the ancient mind, life and death were not opposites, but partners in an endless cycle. As inseparable as the Nile and the desert, as sunrise and sunset, every Egyptian lived in quiet preparation for eternity. From the poorest farmer to the greatest pharaoh, all believed that the soul's journey did not cease with the final breath. It merely changed form, moving from one realm to another, a journey across the sands of time. For the pharaoh, this journey was everything. He ruled as a god on earth, and in death, he was destined to join the gods among the stars. But immortality required care, precision, and devotion, for eternity had to be built. And so arose one of humanity's most astonishing achievements. The tombs of Egypt. Some were simple shafts of stone, others vast temples carved from living rock. But all shared one purpose, to protect the spirit of the king and guide him safely to the afterlife. Imagine a team of architects standing beneath the desert sun, drawing lines in the sand. They study the stars, aligning their design with the north, the direction of eternity. The chosen site is sacred, for it must face the heavens, where the soul of the pharaoh will ascend. Thousands of craftsmen, masons, and laborers begin their work, chiseling limestone and granite, painting ceilings with constellations, and carving prayers into every wall. The tomb is not merely a grave, it is a universe in miniature. Its corridors mirror the journey of the sun through the underworld, and its chambers echo the stages of rebirth. As the work continues, priests chant hymns and purify the tools, ensuring that even the act of carving becomes a sacred ritual. When at last the tomb is complete, it stands as a silent promise, a bridge between life and forever. Within its depths, a sarcophagus awaits, carved with symbols of protection and filled with magic spells from the Book of the Dead. The walls tell the story of creation, of gods and stars, of the soul's perilous voyage through the Duat, the underworld, where serpents, lakes of fire, and divine judges test the spirit's purity. For the Egyptians believed that after death, every soul must stand before Osiris, Lord of the afterlife. In the whole of two truths, the heart of the deceased was weighed upon a scale against the feather of Med. If the heart was light, free from wrongdoing, the soul passed into the fields of reeds, a paradise where rivers flowed gently through fields of gold. But if the heart was heavy with sin, it was devoured by Amit, the monstrous eater of the dead, and the soul was lost forever. To ensure that the pharaoh's heart would be pure, the priests prepared his body with the greatest care. The process of mummification was both science and prayer, a symphony of ritual precision. First, the organs were removed and placed in canopic jars, each guarded by a protective deity. Then the body was dried with natron salt for 40 days, wrapped in hundreds of layers of linen, and anointed with sacred oils. Amulets shaped like scarabs and eyes were placed among the wrappings, each one bearing words of protection. When the final bandage was laid, the priests placed a mask of gold over the face, a perfect, eternal image of the king. Through this mask, his soul would recognize its body and return each night to rest. In the dim light of torches, the mummy was lowered into its sarcophagus, and the air filled with incense, thick as clouds. Priests recited the opening of the mouth ceremony, touching the mummy's lips and eyes with ritual tools so that he might speak, see, and breathe again in the next world. Then, at last, the great stone doors were sealed. The tomb became silent. Above, the desert wind whispered over the dunes. Below, eternity waited. The great pyramid of Khufu rose as the mightiest of all, a mountain of stone built for a single soul. Its sides aligned perfectly with the stars, and its passages pointed toward the constellations of the north, where immortality was said to dwell. Inside, in that cool, eternal stillness, the pharaoh lay beneath millions of tons of stone, closer to the heavens than any mortal could dream. Later, kings built their tombs deep in the Valley of the Kings, hidden from the eyes of thieves. Each was a labyrinth of corridors and painted rooms, filled with treasures, food, statues, and sacred texts. Gold gleamed like captured sunlight. Perfume jars still held the scent of myrrh and cedar after thousands of years. Every item had a purpose, every object a prayer. And so they slept. Ramses, Hatshepsut, Siti Tutankhamun, their dreams sealed behind stone, their names carved for eternity. Centuries passed. The temples fell silent. Sand swallowed the roads to the tombs. The voices of the priests faded, and the desert reclaimed its quiet throne. But Egypt does not forget. Even in silence, the pharaohs remained, waiting, and one by one, the world rediscovered them. When Howard Carter opened the tomb of Tutankhamun in 1922, he found the young king lying exactly as his priests had left him, his mask shining in the lamplight, his hands crossed upon his chest, his expression serene. In that still moment, thousands of years vanished. The air itself seemed to breathe again with the presence of the past. Perhaps that is the true power of Egypt, not only its monuments or treasures, but its ability to make time pause, to remind us that death is not the end of the story. To the ancient Egyptians, eternity was not an abstract dream. It was something you could build, brick by brick, word by word, life by life. They believed that memory, love, and devotion could defy the silence of the grave. And maybe, as we whisper their names even now, we prove them right. For in every stone that catches the setting sun, in every symbol still glowing faintly on a tomb wall, in every dream that carries us toward peace, their world endures. The pharaohs sleep, yes, but their story never closes. The sand covers their cities, but the stars above still shine as they did then, guiding the souls of kings. And perhaps, if you listen closely enough, guiding you, too, through the stillness of night, toward your own quiet eternity. The great builders through the long centuries of Egypt's history, one truth remained constant, that to build was to live forever. Stone was the language of eternity, and the hands of kings shaped time itself. Each pharaoh dreamed of leaving a mark upon the desert vast enough that even the winds would whisper their names. And so the land became a gallery of greatness, temples, obelisks, and pyramids rising from the sands, like the bones of gods. Among these dreamers, one name towers above all: Khufu, the great pyramids builder. More than 4,000 years ago, he commanded a monument so vast that no later age would surpass it. The pyramid at Giza, rising like a perfect mountain of light, was his stairway to the heavens. Its sides aligned to the stars, its proportions flawless, its purpose divine. Inside, narrow corridors twist through silence toward the king's chamber, a space both simple and sacred. There, the pharaoh's soul was to ascend, carried upward by the very geometry of the cosmos. It is said that even in Khufu's day, the people marveled at its creation. Tens of thousands worked not as slaves, but as devoted craftsmen, their labor an offering of faith. They sang as they raised the stones, believing that by helping their king reach eternity, they too shared in his immortality. When the work was done, Khufu's pyramid gleamed in the sunlight, its limestone casing smooth as glass, its tip capped in gold. To stand before it was to feel the heartbeat of heaven itself. Centuries later, another name rose: Hatshepsut, the woman who became Pharaoh. Born a daughter of kings, she refused to let her destiny be confined to the title of queen. When her husband died, she claimed the throne, not as regent, but as ruler in her own right. She wore the false beard of kingship, dressed in male regalia, and stood before the gods as Egypt's sovereign. Her reign was one of peace and prosperity, and her vision turned toward art, trade, and the temple. At Deir el-Bahri, on the west bank of the Nile, she built a masterpiece of temple unlike any before or since. Terraces rise from the desert cliffs like the steps of the horizon, each one lined with columns, gardens, and pools. It was called Jizar Jezuru, the Holy of Holies. There, the walls tell her story, her divine birth, her coronation, her voyages to the fabled land of Punt to bring back incense trees and treasures from across the seas. Time tried to erase her, for later kings feared her example. Her name was chiseled from stone, her statues smashed. Yet her temple still stands, serene and beautiful, a monument to courage and grace. The wind that brushes its columns seems to whisper her defiance. I was here, I still am. Then came Akhenaten, the heretic king, the dreamer who turned his face to the sun. In an age of many gods, he saw only one, the Aten, the radiant disk that gives life to all. He closed the temples of Ammon, broke the old priesthood's power, and built a new capital in the desert, Akhetaten, the horizon of the Aten. There, under the open sky, he and his queen, Nefertiti, worshipped the sun's light as the purest form of divinity. The art of his time changed too. Gone were the stiff, formal figures of earlier ages. Instead, reliefs showed the royal family as they truly were, laughing, embracing, their children playing at their feet. It was a revolution of tenderness, a glimpse of the human heart behind divine faces. But Akhenaten's dream was fragile. After his death, his city fell silent, his faith forgotten, and his name erased from the records. Only in later centuries would his strange beauty be rediscovered, a reminder that even in a world of gods, there were those who dared to search for a deeper light. From the ruins of his vision rose one who would restore Egypt's balance, a boy king named Tutankhamun. He ascended the throne at 9 years old, guided by priests and generals, returning the worship of Amun and rebuilding the temples his predecessor had forsaken. His reign was brief, yet his legacy became eternal, not for what he built, but for what was found. When his tomb was opened more than 3,000 years later, it was as though time had held its breath. The golden mask that covered his face shone softly in the light of the explorer's lamp, serene, youthful, eternal. Every treasure within that chamber, from chariots to jewelry, told the story of a civilization that had mastered death. Tutankhamun had not sought glory in life, yet in death he became the voice of Egypt once more, whispering its secrets to the modern world. And then there was Ramses, the great user Mata Setipina. Ramses Miriamun, the name itself. A thunderclap. He ruled for more than 60 years, a span so vast that generations were born and died beneath his reign. He fought great battles, built cities, and carved his image upon temple walls from Nubia to the Delta. At Abu Simbel, he raised colossal statues of himself, each one 60 feet high, gazing eternally across the desert. Inside the temple, light itself was his ally, twice a year. The rising sun pierced the doorway and illuminated his image upon the inner wall. Even the cosmos seemed to bow before him. Yet beyond the grandeur, Ramses was remembered also for love. His queen, Nefertari, was the jewel of his life, and he built for her a temple beside his own, her likeness carved with equal majesty. On its walls, he wrote to her not as king to subject, but as man to woman, for whom the sun shines. Their names endure, together still, side by side in stone, as the desert wind hums its endless lullaby. So many kings, so many dreams. Khufu's precision, Hatshepsut's grace, Akhenaten's vision, Tutankhamun's quiet immortality, Ramses' eternal pride. Each believed that, through their works, their names would never die. And they were right. The temples may crumble, their colors fade, yet their stories remain carved not only in stone, but in the human imagination. They remind us that to build is to believe, that beauty, courage, and faith can outlast empires. When night falls over Egypt, and the moonlight gleams upon the ruins, it is said that the spirits of the great builders still walk among them. Perhaps they look upon their creations and smile, for even now, thousands of years later, their dreams still hold shape, their shadows still stretch across the sands, and their names, spoken softly under the stars, still echo through eternity. Gold, dust, and memory. The river still flowed, calm and eternal. The sun still rose, gilding the temples in light, and yet, beneath the surface of eternity, Egypt began to change. For even the brightest dawn must one day give way to dusk. Empires are like living things. They grow, they flourish, and they fade. And though the pharaohs called themselves gods, even they could not hold back the turning of time. The long piece of Egypt's golden age slowly gave way to struggle. The great builders were gone, their monuments complete, their tombs sealed. New kings rose brave, ambitious, sometimes desperate. Yet the magic of the old world began to dim. Foreign armies pressed at the borders, Libyans from the west, sea peoples from the sea, Assyrians and Persians from the east. The once mighty empire, which had ruled from the Mediterranean to the Sudan, now trembled like a reed in the wind. The temples still burned incense, and priests still sang hymns to the gods. But even their voices grew weary, echoing through half-empty halls. Gold that once flowed freely from Nubian mines dwindled. Trade faltered, and with it, the faith of the people began to waver. In the north, the Delta kings ruled from Tanna. In the south, high priests of Ammon grew powerful in Thebes. Egypt became a land divided not by river or desert, but by time itself, a fading echo of its own grandeur. Still, the people endured. They farmed the black earth, prayed to the old gods, and watched the Nile rise and fall, just as their ancestors had done for thousands of years. Then, new conquerors arrived. First the Persians, then the Greeks under Alexander the Great. When he stood before the oracle at sea, far out in the western desert, the priests greeted him as the son of Amun. Even the foreigners sought legitimacy in Egypt's divine light. He ordered new temples built in the ancient style, honoring gods whose names he barely knew. And when he died, his general Ptolemy took Egypt for his own, founding a new dynasty of Greek pharaohs. Under their rule, Alexandria rose, a city of marble and scholars, where the library of the world gathered the wisdom of centuries. Philosophers, poets, and scientists came from every corner of the earth to learn beneath its shining towers. The old gods shared space with new ones. Isis and Serapis stood beside Zeus and Athena. And though the language of the court was Greek, the heart of Egypt still beat in the temples along the Nile. Then came the last and most luminous of its queens, Cleopatra Septimo, the woman whose name would outlast kingdoms. She was the final blossom of an ancient tree, brilliant, learned, and proud. She spoke many tongues, studied the stars, and ruled with a grace that awed even Rome. Her reign was a flicker of gold before the night, a last reflection of the sun, before it sank, beyond the desert horizon. When Cleopatra's empire fell and Egypt became a province of Rome, the old gods finally began to fade. The temples emptied, their columns cracked, their statues worn smooth by wind and time. The sacred tongue of hieroglyphs fell silent, its meaning forgotten. Only the river remained faithful, whispering the same lullaby it had sung since the world began. Centuries passed. The sands crept inward, burying cities and palaces, covering the tombs that once gleamed with gold. The names of the pharaohs vanished into myth, half remembered, half believed. Travelers told tales of cursed mummies, of treasure buried beneath the dunes, of spirits that guarded the secrets of the dead. Egypt became a dream, a mirage shimmering at the edge of history. But dreams, like the Nile, always find their way back. In the modern age, explorers return to the land of the pyramids with lanterns and spades, chasing whispers of lost tombs. One by one, the pharaohs awoke. The sands parted to reveal temples still painted in color, inscriptions bright as though written yesterday. Sarcophagi gleamed under torchlight. Statues opened stone eyes after millennia of sleep. The world stewed in awe once more. When Howard Carter found the tomb of Tutankhamun, the silence of 30 centuries was broken. It was as though Egypt had been waiting, patient as ever, for humanity to remember. The golden mask of the boy king reflected not only his face, but the face of the civilization that had created him. Brilliant, mysterious, eternal. Today, those same relics travel the world, carried from museum to museum, still glowing softly under glass. They speak without words of faith, of beauty, of humanity's longing to be remembered. And though the voices of the priests are gone, the message remains, that the line between life and eternity is thin as a breath, and that memory itself can be a form of immortality. The Nile still flows, as it always has. The pyramids still rise against the dawn. Children in modern Egypt still play on the same soil their ancestors once walked barefoot upon. Time has changed everything, and nothing. For the pharaohs dreamed not only of ruling the world of their day, but of being remembered in ours. And so they are. Their names live on in stories, in stone, in the quiet awe of travelers standing beneath their monuments. And every time we speak of them softly, reverently, we give them life again. So when night falls over the desert, and the wind drifts through the silent halls of forgotten temples, perhaps you might imagine the faint sound of footsteps, the echo of a priest's hymn, or the whisper of a queen's voice carried upon the air. For Egypt never truly died. It only sleeps a golden kingdom resting beneath a blanket of sand, waiting for the curious, the dreamers, and the historians to call its name once more. Lessons of the living gods. The night settles softly over the Nile. The last light of the sun fades beyond the western hills. The land of the dead, and the river glows like a ribbon of bronze beneath the rising moon. From far away comes the call of a night heron, lonely and eternal. The desert cools, and the stars appear, ancient and patient, shining over a land that has known them for 5,000 years. Here, in the hush between worlds, the story of Egypt feels alive again, not as a place of dust and relics, but as a living dream, a reflection of everything humanity has ever longed for: beauty, meaning, and a touch of the divine. The pharaohs call themselves gods, yet their stories are deeply human. They loved, feared, built, and hoped, just as we do. They searched for order in chaos, for peace in uncertainty, and for permanence in a fleeting world. Their crowns were of gold, but their hearts were made of the same fragile light that beats within all of us. When we look upon their monuments today, the pyramids, the statues, the tombs, it's easy to see only grandeur, but if you listen more closely, beneath the echo of power lies something far gentler. The sound of human wonder, the same wonder that makes us lift our eyes to the stars and ask, what comes after? Egypt's greatest lesson was not about wealth or conquest. It was about balance, the harmony between all things. The gods did not demand perfection, only that the world remain in rhythm. Day following night, flood following drought, birth following death. To live in Ma, at truth and order, was to live in peace. Even now, this ancient wisdom whispers to us. The world changes. Empires rise, nations fall. Inventions reshape life beyond recognition. Yet the need for balance never fades. We still seek it, in our homes, in our hearts, in our restless minds before sleep. Perhaps that is why Egypt endures not as a memory of power, but as a reminder of calm. To walk through the ruins of Karnak or gaze at the Sphinx is to feel time dissolve. You realize that the hands that carved those stones are gone, yet their work remains serene, patient, undimmed. They built for eternity, and eternity received them kindly. We, too, leave our marks, not in stone, but in kindness, in love, in the quiet good we do. These, too, are monuments, invisible but enduring. The pharaohs believed the soul could live forever if its name was remembered. They built monuments so vast that the desert itself would carry their memory. But perhaps the truest immortality is simpler, to be remembered not for what we possessed, but for what we gave. There, as a story told in ancient Egypt about a man who died with nothing but his good deeds. When he reached the hall of judgment, his heart was lighter than the feather of Mat. The gods smiled and said, "You have lived as truthfully as the sun." He was granted eternal peace, not because he was powerful, but because he was kind. The Egyptians were right to see death, not as an ending, but as a continuation, a crossing from one form to another. In every setting sun, in every seed that falls to the earth, in every sigh that turns to sleep, the same rhythm plays. Endings becoming beginnings. Maybe that's why their civilization feels so peaceful, even in ruin. They accepted impermanence, but they built beauty anyway. They knew the desert would reclaim their cities, but they painted the walls with stars all the same. They understood that even if time took their bodies, it could never take their meaning. When we lie down at night and close our eyes, we, too, practice a kind of faith. We surrender to darkness, trusting that morning will come again. In that small choir act lives the same belief that guided the builders of Egypt, the faith that light always returns. So what do the pharaohs teach us across the gulf of millennia? That greatness is not in how long we live, but in how deeply we live. That beauty is worth creating even when no one is watching. That peace begins not in palaces or temples, but in the stillness of one's heart. And perhaps most of all, that everything we love, the river, the stars, the breath of life itself, continues in cycles without end. Nothing is ever truly lost. It simply changes form, like two Nile's eternal tide. As the desert night deepens, imagine the spirits of the ancient kings and queens rising from their tombs of stone. They walk once more beside the river, their golden jewelry dimmed, but their eyes still bright with purpose. They look upon the world they once ruled and smile. For their stories are still told, their names still spoken, their dreams still alive in the hearts of those who remember. And now, their whispers reach you, gentle as wind through papyrus reeds. Live with balance. Create with love. Rest without fear. For all things return. The stars above Egypt burn quietly, just as they did when Khufu's pyramid was young. The moon drifts over the Valley of the Kings, silvering the cliffs where Hatshepsut sleeps. The river moves softly toward the sea, carrying reflections of light and time. And somewhere in the distance, a temple bell echoes, slow fading, timeless. The gods are silent now, but their peace remains. It lives in the rhythm of the world, in the quiet of the night, and in the slow, steady breath of those who listen. And so, as our journey through Egypt draws to its close, let us carry that peace with us, the calm of an ancient river, the patience of stone, and the wisdom of a people who turned life itself into a prayer. And now, dear viewer, our journey through ancient Egypt comes to its gentle end. The torches of the temples have dimmed, and the golden halls of the pharaohs grow quiet once more. The river flows on beneath the moon, carrying our thoughts softly toward the horizon of dreams. Close your eyes for a moment and listen. Can you hear it? The slow murmur of the Nile, the whisper of wind through papyrus reeds, the faint echo of distant bells calling the faithful to rest. It is the same music that has played for thousands of years, the lullaby of eternity. The pharaohs sleep in their tombs of stone, wrapped in the peace they sought in life. Their cities lie beneath the sands, yet the memory of their world still glows like embers beneath the surface of time. Their names, Hatshepsut, Ramses, Tutankhamun, drift through history like constellations, each one a star that refuses to fade. But Egypt's true gift was never gold, nor empire, nor even the glory of its kings. Its gift was stillness, a deep and abiding calm, a trust in the order of things, in the balance that holds both life and death, sunrise and nightfall, in the same embrace. That same calm waits for you now. As the night deepens, let your thoughts settle like sand in the quiet riverbed. Let the weight of the day slip away. You are safe here, surrounded by the hum of ancient peace, by the rhythm that has guided countless souls to rest. Above you, the stars still keep watch. The same stars that once shone over the Great Pyramid. The same that guided the builders, the dreamers, the storytellers of the Nile. Their light is gentle and endless, and it reaches even here, across ages, across silence to touch you now. So breathe slowly. Feel the stillness of the desert, vast and calm. Feel the coolness of night flowing like the river itself. And know that time, in all its great turning, holds you tenderly within its current. Thank you, truly, for being part of this journey, for listening, supporting, and keeping these stories alive with your kindness. Your presence means more than words can tell. And if this is your first time visiting Go to Sleep Historian, welcome. I'd love to have you join our growing circle of dreamers and travelers, so please consider subscribing, and let us share many more quiet nights together. May your dreams be filled with the warmth of golden sunlight and the peace of ancient stars. And when you wake, may the calm of Egypt, that eternal, gentle order remain with you. Good night, traveler. Sleep well, and let the river carry you into the dawn.